Hello, happy Monday. This is an email from someone, don't know who. Hello, good morning. I want to begin by saying thank you because finding your videos and blogging helped so much. Blah, blah, blah. I just recently turned 18 and I can't remember a time in my life when I don't have a negative relationship with food. I remember as a small child, let's say 8 years old for convenience, feeling immensely guilty about the snacks that I would be able to convince my grandma to give me. I'd ask for a cookie and feel like I was committing a horrible wrong and still for some reason couldn't help myself from asking. A little over half a year ago, I was at X amount of pounds and I decided that I need to lose weight by myself. I came to the brilliant conclusion that the best way to do this was to stop eating altogether. The guilt and self-help stimulated by food was too much. And about a year later, this November, I lost a lot of weight. My eating disorder moved from starving to restriction to overexercise to starving and overexercise. Basically, I'm terribly impatient and jump on whatever seemed to be working best. I've always been overweight, bigger than those around me. After a year of telling myself that eating anything at all was wrong, I was underweight. Whoopie-doo. I realised that the weight wasn't what mattered to me, it was the judgment that society seemed to say weight said about me. What society seemed to say the weight said about me. I'm recovering largely on my own right now, and I still feel the guilt and shame and confusion over food and body image. Essentially, what I'm asking is the normal or ideal relationship with food. How does someone without an eating disorder think or feel? Or do we all secretly have these feelings of shame with us? As someone who has moved from overweight to underweight, all I want to feel is stable. Somehow, even though I'm eating again, I can't get food off my mind. It feels almost tortured. So what does eating however much you want really mean? Is it eating until you stop thinking about it, or eating until you're physically full, or eating until that itch of food goes away, or eating a certain caloric amount? Alright, here's the real, concise question. What does satisfaction feel like? How do we reach it, and is it possible that it won't always be reached in recovery at every meal? Or is the goal to always be satisfied with the food? The sad thing is that I don't know the answer. I can't say I've ever had a normal relationship with food, from binge eating to restrictive eating. Is there a normal, or is it truly different for every person? I apologise for the ramble this has turned into. Well, there's a lot of two things can be true at the same time. Like, it can be different for every person, but the feeling of having a normal relationship, or what I would define as one with food, can be similar for every person as well. And in terms of the question, what does satisfaction feel like? Sometimes it can feel like physical satisfaction after a meal, absolutely. And sometimes and often it also feels like not thinking about food anymore, absolutely. So all of those things are true. And it's like with any feeling, or even physical or mental feeling, it's very difficult to describe a feeling, isn't it? It's very difficult. It's a bit like, even if you try to describe to someone what does it feel like when you need to go for a pee, that's difficult, especially because mentally, if you do need to go to the toilet mentally, you start usually thinking about it first before the physical urge to go to the toilet comes. And so it's a bit like saying to somebody, what's it like after you've been for a pee and you're not thinking about it all the time. So it's physical and it's mental, and it differs as well. And some days, just even if you don't have an eating disorder or you're fully recovered or whatever, some days you just have really hungry days. That's actually normal. It's normal for our levels of satisfaction to fluctuate from day to day, because this is an organism, it's not a machine, so it's not like this certain input-output thing each day. I know yesterday, I just had a hungry day. I ate a load more food than usual. I really struggled to feel satisfied, and it was just one of those days. And today I'm fine. And so that's totally normal to have every now and then, just have a really hungry day. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about when you're going from having this relationship with food that you've described, which is restriction, basically. Because you talk about the binge stuff, but the binge stuff is there because of the restriction, isn't it? That's there most of the time. And by the way, the stuff that you mentioned about when you were a child, well, that's difficult to pull apart as well, because some people might say, well, that's early signs that you had this complicated relationship or an eating disorder relationship with food. But I might say, well, I probably would have felt the same though, because if I kind of conned more sweets out of my grandma, and I knew that my parents wouldn't have let me have that much, I might just feel a bit guilty because I knew that I was sort of like actually doing something that my parents would disapprove of. Not that mine ever did, but do you know what I mean? It's hard to tease apart, well, is that because you have an eating disorder? Is that just because any kid that's sort of like conning their grandmother for anything, whether it's chocolate bars or extra pocket money, might feel a little bit guilty about that, and that's normal too. So I think we've got to be careful of sort of what we necessarily class as abnormal with any of this stuff, because it's in that sort of situation. I'm not saying it's right to feel shame after asking more sweets, but you might be feeling that shame because you know that you did something that your parents wouldn't have approved of. It might not actually be necessarily to do with an ingrained or eating disordered shame response to food, which absolutely would have developed with your restriction, that's for sure. Oh, anyway, I'm rambling now. So what does it feel like to feel satisfied? Well, for me, one of the major things, and I put this down as one of the sort of mental state indicators that you're reaching full proper nutritional rehabilitation, so that's amending energy deficit and energy debt, is, for me, I just stopped thinking about food constantly. And so when the brain thinks that food is a scarce resource, or it doesn't have enough of it, or it just feels like it's in a precarious situation with food, it's going to make you think about food the whole time. It's going to try, food is something it really, really needs. So when your brain thinks that's scarce, it's going to obsess about it. And so one of those mental state markers for me was absolutely just stop thinking about food the whole time. And another one was definitely just beginning to feel gradually, this happened really gradually. I couldn't even put much of a timeline on this. All I can say was it was months, not years and years, but really gradually actually noticing that I could start, I could be eating a dessert or something like that, and then get to a point where it was really like, oh, I can't eat anymore, which was really strange for me, because I used to be able to just plow through and eat, and I would get to the point where I was physically feeling like I was going to throw up, but I still wanted to eat more mentally. So that was something that shifted for me as well. It really wasn't like I was saying, oh, I'm not going to eat more because I'm scared of it or whatever, or I think I've eaten too much or I'm scared of weight gain. It was really just like I was like, oh, I don't want any more, totally done. So actually feeling satisfied in that way. And that didn't happen in a linear fashion either. It's not like I woke up one day and suddenly I had proper or normal satiation cues. It kind of came and it went, and it came and it went, and sometimes I could eat a scary huge amount of food and never feel satisfied, and sometimes I actually started to notice that I was beginning to feel satisfied on a less than insane amount of food. So that gave me hope when I noticed those things as well. But this is just me describing my personal experience, and of course I've worked with plenty of other people that they've described theirs to me as well. But we are all different, and it's about sort of moving through your own personal experience, and the thing to always come back to is restriction, and just understanding that if you're restricting food, then your brain is likely going to become obsessed with food, because it'll think that that's a scarce resource, and it's a resource that it absolutely needs to survive, and that can happen regardless of what your weight is. And the other thing that's going to be critical for you is, you said you're naturally in a larger body, and the reason that you restrict food is because you fear judgment from our society. And so we can't change the world that we're in, you can't change society, but you can change your own reaction to that judgment that you feel, and that is something that you can rewire. Now, it sounds crazy, but you absolutely can. You can teach your brain not to give a shit, and you can teach your brain to appreciate your beautiful body for what it is, and that's really critical rewiring, because all the while, unless you can change that sort of belief system within you that has been taught to you by society, but you do have the ability to change it, but unless you can, that those feelings of wrongdoing, those feelings of shame, those feelings of guilt about being in the body that you were naturally given are not going to go anywhere. And you can't be at peace with the body that you were naturally given while your brain still has this belief that it should be ashamed of it. So that you absolutely have to rewire that. And you do that by not restricting, and you do that by not engaging with thoughts that are negative about your body or actions that are negative about your body, and teaching your brain that there is nothing to be ashamed of about your beautiful body. Hope that helps. Bye.